Welcome in to the latest edition of Capturing the Intangibles, where today we discussed advanced analytics and machine learning. Tapping into innovative ambition and measurable ROI with the right tools, our lead data scientist breaks this down and more as we dive in to see how businesses are asking more from their data. Hello and welcome into another captivating episode of Capturing the Intangibles. We've got a really interesting episode centered today around machine learning. And that means we've brought in the big guns that actually knows what the heck they're talking about. Sandeep, welcome in and thanks for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
And thank you for having me on this podcast. I'm glad to be here. So my name is Sandeep Anand. I manage the Decision Science and Analytics group for Infor. So my team of very smart people work through machine learning problems with a focus on customers and their value. So we've been doing this for Infor for 8-9 years now, and looking to grow the footprint of AI and machine learning for our customers.
Fantastic. So let's kind of get into it quickly here. So machine learning, especially in the enterprise industry, is still something that feels to be so abstract to many, right? And it's almost like all these product offerings, they're shouting, they're touting ML, and sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But why is it so abstract for companies specifically? And maybe a follow-up onto that, how do you make it real, right? How do you go from something so abstract to explaining this to customers as something that you ultimately have to pay attention to?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And in fact, that is the fundamental question. So, when you talk to CIOs and you talk to executives, they look at it from a strategic point of view, right? What can we do and learn from our data, right? So when they look at machine learning, they're not looking at it from a technology play of the greatest models. They're looking at how can I use it for something that's valuable? What can they do to improve the ways they work? But then right away they get cold sweat because it's also what can I do with my team? Is my organization ready for it? Am I ready for it? Do I have the right data, right? And so what makes it so abstract in the enterprise is those questions, right? It is, am I good enough? Is it going to be valuable? Is it just a big waste of my time? Maybe I need to do something more specific. And I think that's the challenge a lot of industries have. I mean, they're trying to overcome it. They're trying to build their own data centers, their own machine learning laboratories. But at the end of the day, it's always annoying feeling that maybe this isn't going to do anything for me in the short term. And strategically, I need to make sure I can show value, and the industry is way ahead, right? So that's what keeps them up at night. Is can I solve for the problems I need to solve? And I think that problem is what keeps the analysis paralysis, right? If you think of it, if you're reading all the news about how the wonders of machine learning can solve this and that, and you're like, oh, my industry is different, my industry is not in the maturity curve, and then the decision making starts wavering around, okay, maybe I need to do something more tangible.
Sandeep, when you go to a customer or a company, and they want to do some machine learning, some optimization, some predictions, what is the red flag that you're looking for? Like, okay, is this possible or not? What is I would say the intangible almost like that you are looking for? Like, this project is going to be a problem, or this project is going to be okay, right? So, what is the immediate red flag that you say, this is going to be difficult?
It's a very good question, and some of it is instinct, right? I think you have to take that into account. But so our philosophy, it can be summed into three pillars. We want to emphasize agility. We want to emphasize innovation that's customer centric, right? Not technology, but mostly around customer value. And then ultimately it's the value that the customer has. So when we are talking to a customer, we try to appraise from our initial conversations, are they innovative or do they want to be innovative? No customer says they do not want to be innovative, but are they ready for that kind of change? Are they looking from a strategic perspective and I want to change my business and focus on advanced analytics, right? But do I want to do it quickly? Or are they looking to for some 2-year, 3-year roadmap? Which there's nothing wrong with that, but change starts from small bite-sized increments. We believe that, and we want work with partners that are looking at the art of the possible. We just had a conversation with a customer, and we were discussing with him a machine learning problem, and he said, Sandeep, I don't want to build a Maserati. I want to build a rowing boat first, and that's the type of customers we want to start with. Start with a boat, 2 hours, and then build your Titanic. Well, don't sink, but build a big ship. So that's what we want to look at. And value centric, right? So make sure you're doing something valuable and not just fancy, right? That's the key as well.
Yeah, and what we talked about in one of the podcasts, with these machine learning projects, IoT or innovation projects, that we have seen that a lot of them, they are POCs, right? So the CIO, maybe wants to claim that they are doing some innovation, but they want to do some quick and dirty innovation, but then they never follow up to be really workloads in production, right? So how do you see that, or do you see that some of them will become eventually, workloads in production, or is still AI projects a POC status?
No, that's a very good question. And in fact, this is where Infor plays to its strengths. Most projects start with an idea and a value realization, but most of the time, and this is what Gartner talks about in other publications, it's the challenge is deploying it into production and using it, right? And so we use Infor assets because they automate some of the really hard and boring pieces of it. But yes, I think the challenge, of course, starts with the idea, but also it's using it and using it over time, right? And so one of the use cases we have started working with our customer around is shipping containers and trying to figure out what's the right way to maintain them. Seems like a very simple problem, but the machine learning use case, you turn it on, it's not going to just give you value right away. You have to use it over time, and you have to make sure that the customer is using the results of it in a business workflow, right? The consumers are not data scientists. The consumers are production planners, factory workers, and engineers and managers. You got to make it a way for them to consume it and act on it, and that's where the value is, right? So it's not just the deployment of it, it's the who are you deploying to, how are they using it, and is it simple enough? Are you giving them a big, long Excel formula with lots of numbers? They can't do much with it, right? So you have to learn to simplify it and cater to the audience who are going to use it.
That's really interesting, that sort of parallel that you're drawing, because I think what you're describing is a lot of the customers that take advantage of these types of things, of course, have that certain degree of ambition, right? But it's realistic ambition that makes them successful. And maybe that's why a lot of projects in this space fail, is because they take it to such an extreme of boiling the ocean. And then to your earlier point of it causes them to ask these uncomfortable questions. And am I ready for this sort of stuff? So it's really maybe somewhat difficult to find that sort of balance. But one of the things that I've noticed, especially in some of our engagements, even Sandeep, is that when we partner with even in our internal community or with our customers in identifying those use cases for their business, there seems to be this connection to what it can do in the consumer world. It's much more abstract for the business, I think. And maybe that's got an element of uncomfortability to it. But is there an easy way of applying these conversations to where we can start to get those use cases out of customers, right? It's very easy when we start to talk about things like predictive maintenance. There's those low-hanging fruits, as we like to call them, that just make sense. But how do we go about engaging customers and talking to them about, well, here are the opportunities or the threats that machine learning can take care of, right? How do we have those conversations?
That's a very good question. I think not everyone is ready for that type of transformation. Ultimately, you go back to the main principles of value engineering. It's about revenue. How much money are you going to make out of using something that involves advanced analytics and decision making? How much costs are you going to save or reduce based on understanding your supply chain, understanding the logistics of your supply chain, or the characteristics that drive your business performance, and of course around safety and efficiency. What are the things that will allow you to do things better, more safely, cater to your consumers in a more meaningful fashion. So you want to build with our consumers something that resonates, that's tangible, right? And so ultimately, the philosophy of our group is to make sure that we always attach real value, impactful value to any use case we work on, because that's how you transform. That's how you make this adoption happen. And then, of course, showcase it. Let us talk about it. Let's measure it together and realize the value so that other industries with similar challenges, similar concerns about trying to get to that stage, understand that it's not as challenging as it may seem, not as difficult to leap into this dark hole of advanced analytics and get something tangible out of it.
Yeah, and I mean, Rick, on your question, if you, let's say you're working on, one of the templates that we're working with our HCM team is, employee attrition, right? So let's say you go to a customer and says, well, and to the CHRO, you talk about that you have these capabilities that you could predict, if some employees will leave, or not. That's actually, it's a very good feature, but at the same time, there is some change management and transformation because you have to go and speak to the managers in that organization, and then all of a sudden they have a list of people that potentially, could leave. And how do you deal with that? Because maybe it's an intangible list or a tangible list, but then you start to talk to the employees, and what do you say? Well, I got a machine learning model that is predicting that you are leaving. So you are not doing that conversation that way, right? So, and so how do you, so there is a change management as well, because all of a sudden there is something that is predicting or optimizing the process, and the people needs to follow that optimization and the prediction as well. So it's not having just the shiny tool telling me something, but there is a change management as well, right?
There absolutely is. And I think to your point, I think that's another key that we need to talk about, right? And when people think of machine learning projects, and we like to call them decision science projects because it's not about the machine learning. To your point, the emphasis on machine has been improperly allocated to the value. It's about decision science. How do you take data, convert it to decision making, enable users to make proper decision, and knowing that the decisions are not based on machines, but they're based on your personal experience, right? The models are supposed to help you, not replace the thinking for you, right? They just provide you more analytics. So when we go to customers, it's not a data scientist. It's actually people who understand some of this behavioral analytics, people who understand how complicated data engineering based projects are run, and to make sure you have the right workflows. It's about empowering users. So we like to connect not only with the executives who want something meaningful out of it for those three value pillars, but also the users, right? So we like to sit with the users, understand their user experience of it, and then personalize it, right? Because otherwise, the change management problem is always going to be difficult to solve. Machine learning projects will fail if the users of it are not able to believe it, understand it, or change it, and override it when needed, right? You ultimately need to give the power to the consumers of the model to make better decisions, and not try to think of replacing them, because that's not what this model's up for, right? And I think Infor looks at it in that way, and therefore is successful in the adoption of some of these projects, right? Because I think without kind of the human element to it, without the proper disciplines, you're just going to get another number, and there are many numbers people have to deal with. What makes this number any different? So you always need to link it to something very useful to the end user.
Yeah, it's very good point that you're saying. People maybe are afraid about their jobs, but at the end of the day, AI is bringing the next gen optimization, right, of the business processes. We have built as Infor business application to optimize business processes, but those are built with hard-coded algorithms based on data. Maybe they're a little bit in silo. Now we have all the technology to bring the data all together, and we have the machine learning to even bring better optimization and offer that to corporation end users, planners, and people in purchasing and sales, in HR, and so on, right? So for us, we have now a new technology to really get that better from an optimization perspective. So that's really good.
Yeah, and a couple of things that I keep hearing again and again throughout this conversation is just analytics. And let's just think about it broadly for a second. And Sandeep, I'm curious your response to this. how would you distinguish between analytics and machine learning, or would you?
So there is a distinction. I think that machine learning is more of the discipline and the mathematical evolution of that process. I think analytics is mostly more catered towards the result of taking that, ingesting it, and making. In some cases, people jump to analytics as more of like the operational dashboards, but we look at descriptive analytics, predictive analytics, prescriptive analytics, right? So it's a discipline that allows you to, over time and maturity, allow for better decision making, right? So the info assets help kind of focus the data and over time help you make better decisions. And so analytics is, for me, the more prescriptive analytics, which is how can you help users do better decisions by learning through the data. Machine learning are just ways and means of modeling some of those approaches.
Yeah, I would agree. It's if you were to describe it, it's almost like, well, it's the extra engineering of that data to uncover new insights that is a part of your analytics practice, right? But we get that question in the field quite often, is how do we distinguish between the two? Because to some users it kind of feels the same, and sometimes they can be given, it can be like a facade that maybe I've got some sort of I've got some sort of AI insights going on in my organization, when really it's just maybe a real-time view of what's currently going on. It's not really getting you into that next level. So
Yeah.
it's almost like that machine learning is the advanced analytics now.
Yeah, if you take an example like maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, to find out that that you didn't ship something to a customer, you will run a report, and maybe 10 days later you figure it out that you didn't ship. That was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. You run a report. Oh, in the report you read, oh, I didn't ship this to the customer. Or maybe the customer called you and they were angry about that they didn't get the stuff that they wanted. Then we move the needle on technology to BAM, or business activity monitoring. Well, now on an event architecture, you now can tell almost on real time that you are going to be late for a shipment, or you have the analytics that you can say real time that things are happening. But what with ML and AI, the promise I am very excited about, that now I can predict. I'm moving the needle. It's a time dimension. I was 30 days on a report when I run a report, and 30 days late, I'm figuring out I'm late. Then we move the needle to now, and now we move it the time dimension to even before the now, right? So that's really what I think from a business perspective, we have a huge opportunity to not only optimize but to predict, and move the time needle to before the now. And I think where the companies, that they will get that, they will be, not only better optimized, but they will be more relevant and better competitive in the market, right? So even with analytics, if I go and run a dashboard, let's say the current of the 5 years ago, as a user, I log in, I run a dashboard, and the dashboard will tell me the situation as we speak. So it's the now, right? How can we move from the now to, hey, I'm going to predict it now, in 2 days before or 10 days before, right? So that is where the game is at the end of the day. Very simple, in my words, that, oh, now I can tell you before, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think just to add to that and to extend it, I think where Infor actually is a market leader is we have industry-centric focus and understanding of businesses, of our customers. So the analytics is not just a broad analytics of predictive time to failure. It's also based on the fact that we understand our industries that we operate in, and we provide them curated content that's very relevant to what's happening in the food sector versus the healthcare sector, right? I think the analytics focused on industries makes it a very powerful offering and very useful for our customers.
Yeah, I do have a question for that, Sandeep. So there are some vendors, that they own maybe a CRM data, or maybe they have, or the other vendors, maybe they do human capital management or financial. So is the machine learning of these vendors less intelligent or more intelligent, or is it better to have more domains of data together, if let's say you have HCM, you have financials, you have ERP, you have asset management, right? You have and the supply chain with the network. So how different is your machine learning if you have all this domain data all together versus it's just a domain, one domain?
Yes, and I have an anecdote for one of my principal data scientists. He was asked in a meeting how much data is sufficient. He said, I need one data point to predict the future. I need more data if you want a better prediction of the future. And so data enrichment, more data you have, and the more you can connect the relationships in the data, you have visibility across your business, and it's very powerful. And so do you want to start there? You don't have to. If you have industry specific applications or verticals, they are useful. It does help when you start seeing beyond just the supply chain. You start looking at human resources. You look at finance. Your budget plans are driven by your logistic plans, right? And so having that access is always better. You don't need to start there. And I think part of the journey we endorse is start again with the rowing boat, and then gradually get into a bigger and bigger, more automated environment, because that is more ultimately successful. But it is better to have more diverse data in the long run. I think that's where the industry is moving.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, so let's get into the technology a little bit, because I've got an interesting question specific to your entire team, Sandeep. So we're still, I would argue, very early, or I hate when we start to talk about the hype cycle, because I wish we could focus on pushing customers up that hype cycle even more. But machine learning is still new, we know that, specific to the enterprise. But has the technology become easier to work with? Can we do machine learning from a project perspective? We know we've got infinite compute these days, but is it easier to actually create these sort of insights today, or is it still a cumbersome task?
So we started building machine learning models 10 years ago. At that point, we worked with AWS, but at that point it was quite an achievement to have 400 servers running a model and then returning results at the same time. We were quite proud of ourselves with that. Now it's an irrelevant discussion. It's not about hardware, because everything is virtualized. It's mostly about what cool models do you have. And so we have transformed as a mindset from worried about the compute and worried about the costs to more about what are the business features that drive it, right? And so even at this point, in the way our team operates, it's not about the models themselves, because there's so many different very, very good models. It's about how those models can be set up for enterprises to use them more effectively. So the problems have changed to be more complex, more not abstract, but more curated towards specific problems. And that allows us to be fast, right? I think we no longer have to worry about compute. We no longer have to worry about model complexity or which models to use. It's mostly about how can you quickly turn around the value. So I do think from the journey of where we started and what we're doing now, that the problem keeps changing to be more and more complex, but also happens to get more and more faster. But we just work on harder problems because the easier ones are no longer challenging for any customers to carry out.
Yeah, and I do have a question, maybe not a little bit funny question, but in the developer world, maybe not today, but still I think there is today a lot of that. There is almost like a religion. Like I am a Java developer or a .NET developer or a Python developer, So, and people are very, very, I don't know, but very passionate about, I only want to do Java. No, I don't want to do .NET, or I don't want to Python. So I feel that in the AI world, there is a little bit of that, right? In between the data scientists, they have actually either tools they love or tools they hate. Do you recognize that or not?
Yes, and I think that's where my team straddles the middle ground. So we are more applied ML engineers. So we do have data scientists and data engineers, but we straddle the technology. Everyone loves Python and TensorFlow and Prophet and PyTorch, and I think those are always going to be the case. But ultimately, it comes down to great, but do it in 6 weeks, show some value, and everyone's going to be happy. And I think that helps distill that conversation of technology away. Now with the no-code platform we have at N4S, some of the abstraction goes away and you can focus on the right content, but it's all about execution. That takes away the technology discussions quickly when the goal is to get something done in 6 weeks or less. So
Yeah, do you see when you go to a customers and not a lot of customers can afford to have a data scientist team. We serve SMB customers, but also large corporations. Mostly SMB customers don't have that profile. But when you go to a big customer or large customer, they probably have maybe a data scientist team. Is this discussion about we want to do machine learning models, we want to do all these things, but you have to use per se these tools versus other tools. Do you see this conversation, or
yes.
maybe there are not this conversation on the
Yeah.
table?
Yes, there are. And ultimately, it's that discussion around what are you doing it for? It's decision science. So we encourage you to use your models, link them with InfoOS because we have the extensible APIs that allow it. Some want to prototype the models with our Coleman offering, but ultimately, it's about getting out of the way of a technology battle. If you want a model, you
Exactly.
like the model, just use it, get the results you need, make decisions on it that are valuable. And ultimately, that's the differentiator because otherwise you're always going to compete for the greatest and brightest technology, quantum computing. Yeah, sure, go ahead and do it. Just give me the result and let's make some value for our customers happen with it.
Yeah, and there are also not only the tools, but now you see the discussions about everybody talks how Google is better for AI as a cloud environment versus AWS or Azure, right? Do you see also this discussion, because we do mostly on AWS, right? But do you see customers saying, no, I want per se my machine learning workloads in Google, right? And
Yes.
how do you deal with that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think that we don't want to fight technology battles. I think we're happy with the offerings we have. We offer the interfaces because ultimately we want to get away from the discussion of what's the coolest technology or the less line of codes. And
Exactly.
can you give me the result? And are you going to be happy with it? And can you use it? And if you focus on that, it doesn't matter what the technology. We're not in that business. We're in the business of getting you results that you can measure and are happy with, right? It's how I think of it. So we partner with customers that have their own models, and we want to make sure they can leverage them effectively, quickly, and over time, evolve them like we do for other customers.
Sandeep, is there a particular field of ML that you feel that's been starting to pick up a little bit faster, at least with customer adoption, or maybe something that maybe the most promising for customers more so than others?
No, it's a good question. I think when we look at the enterprise, we're starting to see more adoption of use cases that again are driven by revenue, margin, and efficiency. So I think we look at a lot of use cases that are tracking towards how do I improve things that matter to the company, right? And so we're seeing a lot more of that and focus more on that versus some of the other use cases that are sound a lot more interesting around natural language processing because I think they just tend to have a more long-term empirical value versus the short term. So we are seeing the more need for kind of tracking the regression and demand forecasting use cases versus some other ones. But there's a huge appetite. What we see is that they start and they it opens up an avenue for them and they start getting kind of excited about the potential and then they tend to start hiring, investing, and adopting some of the results.
Do you see any use cases in RPA? And Rick loves RPA. You see his face as well.
Nope.
Do you see any use cases, in RPA? I mean, RPA tools are used a lot. It's hyped, whether we like it or not. It's used a lot. Now the RPA vendors are moving to OCR, right? So all suddenly they don't have anything. They can't scrape any screen anymore, so they have to move to OCRs. And OCR vendors they have hard coded templates, and they figured out, well, we need AI to figure out how Massimo is writing an invoice, or Sandeep is writing an invoice, or Rick, so that I don't need to all kind of configuration. I give my invoice to the machine learning model, and they figure it out and convert it, right? Do you see any of these use cases coming up as well?
Yes, and I think normally those RP use cases, if you think of the mental model of the journey towards prescriptive analytics, tend to be more of the advanced use cases. We encourage that. We encourage them. Generally, the mindset of the users of the RPA use cases are more of the heavy adopters of machine learning. And so we want to get you to that spectrum where it makes sense, where your users' lives are made better. But there tend to be the use cases of those who have very large analytic offices and fully fleshed out teams. Most of the consumers we have are looking at a more modest use cases to start with, which is, do I need to use machine learning? Do I need to automate better data so that I can do advanced analytics? And so from a spectrum, we do see at RPA, but a lot of the time it's mostly on the left-hand side where it is, I'm just starting, what can I do? How do I make money? How do I make my life better? And I think over time they want to adopt. We never want you to jump to the right-hand side and if you're not ready, because that's normally a hard adoption for most people.
So Rick, that confirms the old RPA is RPA, not IPA, intelligent process automation. So everybody's doing still hard-coded flows. So that confirms a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sandeep, how about, can you give us a little flavor of any current project you've got your group working on that the audience might be interested in?
Yes, and so we've started a couple of interesting projects with some of our Spotlight customers. One of the projects is particularly interesting because we are trying to help them forecast for their budgets, the short-term and long-term budgets. But a lot of their potential business is driven by external factors. So most of it around fuel prices. So we have a customer whose business is driven by fuel prices. So how do you use that to make a labor plan more effective? You may not see the connection, but part of that project will be working through how to link some of the external factors around states and locations and roads and prices of commodities to help you better plan your budgets for your store, right? So that's one interesting one. The other one is around maintenance strategies, which sounds very boring, but it's very near and dear to our hearts, which is how do we make better decisions on maintenance plans for very large assets? So this customer has containers, and containers need to be fixed, especially when you have perishable goods in it. And we're trying to help them make better maintenance plans based on just a history of the maintenance required for those containers.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And Massimo, back to your earlier point about the cross-domain data, that's exactly how we're doing that first use case Sandeep alluded to.
Yeah.
Like, who would have ever thought that something that's so distantly a part of one area of my business is going to create so much or influence so much demand or workforce patterns at a completely different part of the business.
Yeah, it's
right?
amazing. I'm really excited about this use case. It's really nice, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this episode, guys. This has been, machine learning, you guys know, has been near and dear to my heart and a part of our business strategy here at Infor for several of the past years. So I'm biased to it, of course. But Sandeep, I really appreciate the time and thanks for joining us today. And I'm really excited and looking forward to a lot of our work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for checking out the episode, and please be sure to subscribe across our various channels and leave us feedback on our content or any topics you might be interested in. Until next time, stay focused, stay safe, stay happy. Cheers.